Hey
Somebody
everyone,
else?
I'm Savannah Marshall coming at you from USA, Massachusetts. Play the drums. Love it.
Nice.
June Boyce Tillman, Professor of Applied Music, University of Winchester, UK, Professor at the Northwest University of South Africa,
Thank
composer,
you.
performer, and choir leader.
Thanks, June. Anybody else like to introduce themselves?
Gillian Howell, I'm in Melbourne, Australia.
Nice. And is that really sunset behind you, or is it a full screen?
No, it's red dirt, but it's not where I am.
Okay. Great. So we have got about 40 minutes for this, so that's quite nice, quite relaxed. I want it to be as challenging as possible. I want to somehow, from my point of view, I would really like some actions to come out of this for everybody in this room. So something that you do that changes your practice, some action that you take out that changes what you do tomorrow. So that's what interests me. Sam, I've known for 4 years. We met through a connection with a charity funder in the UK called Youth Music. We were putting together a presentation for the ISME CMA in Glasgow. And I think, shall I introduce you, or can you introduce yourself, Sam? Would that be good?
Yeah, I'm happy to introduce myself. That's fine, Pete.
There you go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha, or Sam is fine, Spence. I'm Assistant Head of Ealing Music Service, who is the lead organisation of our Music Education Hub. And those of you from the UK will know what they are. Those of you who may not know, we have music services in each of our boroughs areas. And a few years back, we were converted to be what we call music hubs, on the understanding that rather than trying to provide services to schools ourselves, we would partner with more organisations, community groups, charities, to make sure that we could broaden the scope of our offer to better meet the needs of the children and young people who we serve in music education. So that's a little snapshot of what a music education hub is. And as Pete said, yeah, we met 4 years ago. I was part of a group who presented on various matters, and my topic was building a diverse workforce. Just to give you some context, there's 123 music education hubs in the UK, and I am one of 3 Black and minority ethnic. I will call myself Black. I will use the term Black to mean Black minority ethnic, or BAME. I'm one of 3 in a senior position out of all 123 hubs. Now, if you think about the population we're serving, 8 million children, 25,000 schools. I mean, there's so many children out there who represent my cultural group, and yet in the field of music education and music in itself, I mean, it's one of the most diverse forms of art form that exists, and yet it's just woefully represented at higher levels within my organisation. I don't profess to know much about community music other than my personal experiences. It's very much within the formal education sector. So you may be able to present to me some statistics, I never say that word, statistics, which are slightly brighter, possibly not. So just to kind of share some of the things that I've been working on, we're all aware of the terrible death of George Floyd, and the movement, the Black Lives Matters movement, which has definitely been brought into the fore. And I feel quite heartened by what I consider to be a bit of a shift in consciousness over this. I think for me personally, I'm in my 40s now, it's the first time I've seen so many different people of different colours and races actually coming together to collectively say, no, this isn't right. But not only that, what are we going to do about it? I've never seen this before in my lifetime. It was quite hard for me as a person. I was very affected by it. But what I noticed was that there wasn't a lot of conversation happening in my workplace, among my peers. I manage a team of 55 teachers, about 25% of them consider themselves Black minority ethnic. And it was just kind of this thing that happened, but nobody said anything about it. And, and it came back to people feeling just a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit unsure. And I find myself guilty of that. I didn't want to share my feelings. I didn't want to speak my truth. I felt embarrassed, or I didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable if I sort of said, they were saying, well, we should say something about Black Lives Matters. What should we say? And it got me really angry. Like, this is not a buzzword. This is something which we are experiencing as a group of people. And yet I didn't feel that I could speak out until literally I cracked one day in a meeting, and I just burst into floods of tears. And I just said to my head of service, I'm not okay. And if I'm not okay, there's loads of people out there who are not okay. And there's loads of children and young people out there who are not okay. And we shouldn't be avoiding these conversations. And I should be allowed to not be okay, for you to go, okay, what can we do to help? How can we help? And if I'm feeling that way, and I'm an assistant head of a music service, and I feel, you know, I can hold my head up, I'm British, there's lots of people out there who are feeling similar to me. So I think what I wanted to try and do was to get people to really think about diversity as not just a buzzword, not just a tick a box exercise. Obviously, it's much more than that within your organization. If you think about different worldviews, different perspectives, different life experiences, I mean, it can absolutely strengthen any organization. And I think that this is a real time for people to say, okay, let's make some meaningful change. So I guess it's to really open up the conversation to the field of music, music education, community music, and start looking at our organizations, start questioning our motives, our actions, our work, our practices, our attitudes, and also think about what kind of impact we can have on all children, young people, but maybe at this time, especially those who might be specifically affected by current events.
Fabulous. Yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you very much. At this point, what do you think? How do you think the way you got into your job and your work progression? What were did you have to fight? What happened to you that made it possible for you to, so you've arrived and you're now in quite a powerful position, but you're one of three. And so those three in those 123 must have a specific story. So what gave you that? What made you kind of, somebody that you saw went,
So I kind of had to battle with a lot of things when I was younger. I'm a string player by trade, viola, violin, and piano. And that's not unusual. The numbers of children who are Black, who are learning classical instruments in our schools is very, very high, from primary level right through to secondary. But then there's a drop off. It's like lemmings, and some of you may have heard of an orchestra called Chineke, which is now championing a specific orchestra of musicians who are and identify as being Black minority. And I think it's a real shame that we have to do that. But if you look at the other orchestras in the world, there's hardly anybody of colour in them. So I was the only Black person at the Purcell School of Music when I was there. And it was a horrible experience. I hated every minute of it, but I loved music. And it just connected to me. And I refused to, my parents helped me, I refused to kind of let that stop me, but it was very difficult. So I went through a traditional kind of what you might call a middle class, white sort of route to get to going to university and studying music education. I did my master's at the Institute of Education, and I continued up the field. But I kind of had to come from a starting place, which was playing on the level field and the playing field that my white counterparts were on. And the reason why I feel that a lot of people who look like me aren't in the position I'm in is that they don't come through that route. It's almost like a maze where you go down different pathways and then you get to a dead end, then you get to a dead end, and then you get to another dead end. And unless you do certain things and you can overcome certain hurdles and barriers, or somebody kindly opens a door, it's very difficult for you to make it through.
And have there been, and now you've got a position of power, are there actions that you make that you're making sort of weekly, daily, that are trying to open doors and trying?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm very happy to share some of them with you all now. So one of the things I'm very keen to do is to actively seek out and form partnerships with culturally diverse artists and groups in our area. So always looking at who are we working with and what are their practices and what are their values and do they align with ours, and looking at our schedules, looking at our events, and just, we have a little a card on the table at every meeting, and it has key words on it. So one of the words is diversity, another word might be representation, another word might be genre, you know. So we always have these, so that I'm not the only one kind of saying, hey guys, can we get some people of color in there? We all kind of look at what we're doing and say, right, let's address these issues as well. I facilitate and help my organization to facilitate discussions where people do feel uncomfortable. They don't like talking about the fact that there is unconscious bias there in every area of our work. When we're putting together programs and we end with the proms and its pomp and circumstance, and, you know, we've got William Tell Overture and we've got all of these, you know, Eurocentric music on offer, it's traditional. I understand that, and I'm not saying it should go, but actually, why can't we make a departure from that? Especially if in Ealing, nearly 50% of our population are ethnic minorities, and we're still presenting this Eurocentric, homogenous kind of attitude of what the great composers are and great music. So, you know, I kind of help to facilitate those challenges. I've also run a network.
Why not throw
Just
some
Dave,
Sam Cooke in there?
Dave, just wait, will you, please? Thank you. Yeah, keep going, Sam.
I've also headed up networks in a previous life where I worked in another borough called Islington. I was the lead of a Black educators network. Because the other thing that I'm very keen about is, it's all fine and well saying we've got this percentage of people of colour. Yeah, we're doing great. Look how diverse we are. But what does that mean? So what? So you've got 10% of your staff are represented, and in what way is that helping your organization? On what way is that helping to have a positive impact on the pupils and the children and young people that you serve who are of color? In what way is that making a difference? Are they moving any further? Are they simply on the grassroots level? Are you providing opportunities for succession planning? You know, it's kind of all of these things. It's not enough just to say we've ticked that box. So the network that I ran allowed us to, as a group, to be a critical friend really to the council and the organization, and basically help to challenge and support, more importantly, things that were happening in the organization which we felt weren't truly representative and didn't represent, you know, equity and accessibility and inclusiveness from our own perspective. So we were able to say, we actually think that by presenting it this way, some people like us might feel this way. And they go, oh, we didn't think of that. That's great. And part of the organization also, well, the network, was to professionally help with their development. So we had head teachers, we had the only Ofsted inspector of colour, we would have people in senior positions mentoring and working with and supporting the younger members of the network who may be just starting out as music teachers, to kind of see how they could get into these higher positions and maybe overcome some of the issues that were faced. So that's something else, you know, consider a network. And lastly, don't adopt a neutral stance. You know, I think it's really important for organizations to speak out, to say what you align with, what you believe with, and don't worry about upsetting the very vocal minority of people who want us to just stay in the past. By saying nothing, it's possibly even worse than saying something. So just make sure that, you know, you are, as an organization, saying, right, this is what we believe in, make it clear, back it up with action, with actual, not just platitude, but actual things that you are doing to make sure that you are inclusive, accessible, and champion all the differences within your organization.
Brilliant, Sam. So thank you. I mean, yes, don't stand. I mean, it's really interesting, the conversations that you have with people in organizations. So can we, one of the things I'd really would like to happen in this is that some of the people who don't normally speak. So some of the people who don't, you know, whose voices we haven't heard, kind of throw some questions at Sam, or kind of go, yeah, I'd throw some. One of the things I did when this all started off, I challenge you all to do this. Look in your address book, go through your address book on your phone, and see how many people you know from in England we call BME, BAME, in Canada you call it BIPOC, isn't it? So I'm just curious, how many people of color are your friends or are in your network, are musicians that you know, are educators you know? Just see, is it 3, is it 50? And as a challenge, that's quite an interesting challenge, I would say, you know, because where do you start? You start with your own networks, isn't it? You know, we have to build our own network. So,
and having those conversations, you know, and even if you just contact, I wouldn't say you just randomly contact all the people of color and you're like, hi, you know, haven't spoken to you in 10 years, but you know, but have a meaningful conversation and just say, look, I don't really know where to start. I've had these conversations with my staff. They've said to me, Sam, I don't really know where to start or what to say. I just feel like I'd like to hear how you feel about things. I said, great, you know, let's talk about it. And just from that conversation, and, you know, I've had people say, I really don't think I know enough about what's going on. Not only that, how how it aligns with what I do in my work. You know, it's so easy to see yourself as over here and everything else is happening over there, but actually, you know, they're all linked in some way. So yeah, I think it's really important. Have some conversations and bring that to your organization to the highest level that you can, and challenge them, you know, if you're not on that level yourself.
Emily, yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing, and I really value this opportunity to have the conversation. I wanted to sort of just open up I'm not sure if it's a question, but a thought about the kind of decolonize the curriculum movement, what we can collectively do to get more of what has been, you know, I speak from a UK standpoint, more of what has been our country's history represented properly, and how we start that shift or how we continue that shift. That wasn't really a very coherent question, but hopefully there's enough in there.
I understand what you mean.
Thank you.
I mean, unfortunately, the curriculum, certainly sort of A level upwards, is really bad. You know, everything from representation of female composers to composers of color, and then this horrible term, world music. I mean, it's one of the worst terms ever. You know, this world music. Every music comes from the world. What does that mean? You know, so I think it's about looking at the language, and also, even if the curriculum itself is leaning a certain way. I mean, I took great challenge with the new curriculum saying the great composers. To me, it was a kind of dog whistle, because if you said to people, and I did the survey myself, who do you think are the great composers? Most people can only name composers of classical music: Beethoven, Chopin, Schubert, Haydn, whoever, you know. And by leaving that statement hanging in the curriculum document, it leads people to believe that's what should be in there. So I think it's about that interpretation and making sure that whoever is in charge of looking at the syllabus, the curriculum, what children actually taught, all the elements of music can be taught through most types of music. You know, it doesn't have to be, if you're looking at notation, if you're looking at form, if you're looking at, you know, timbre and tempo, all those interrelated elements of music, as they call them now, can be taught through any musical style. And when I train music teachers, I always say to them at the beginning, tell me your favorite music. And then someone will say, oh, I like indie, I like grime, I like this. Okay, give me your favorite artist. And I say, when you start with what you love, then you invite your students to share what they love. And then you build your curriculum from there, and you look at them and their experiences and their loves and their interests, and then take a step back, go to their history, go to their families. You know, we've got a very high Asian, Sikh, Hindu community in Ealing. And some of my teachers are like, I can't teach this music, I don't know anything about it. But they do. Just facilitate the session. You don't have to be an expert. So I think it's really about looking at all your planning, getting teachers to think about, and having those buzzwords, you know, right, okay, I've done my plan. Have I just regurgitated what I do every year? Or have I really thought about the students that I'm teaching? When I look at them, am I catering for you? Am I catering for you? Have I got something in here that you can relate to? So I think that's kind of where it starts from.
Great, thank you. Somebody else? We've got, you know, I'll just say we've got about 25 minutes in this room, this little group.
Don't be shy. There's no stupid questions. Ask whatever you want.
Yeah, June?
Well, my
Then
comment was
Kathleen.
really, it's a question of re-evaluating. I mean, I know Joy's here from South Africa, but the power of that classical tradition, we really have to regard literate and orate traditions as of equal value. That's the fundamental thing we need to do. The literate is not better than orate, and we've taught that for years. And the notion of the composer is foreign to the orate tradition, really. Yeah. I mean, even the very words we use are profoundly different. So it needs a complete rethinking of the value system which underpins our education. And I mean, I'm aware that Joy is more experienced in South Africa than I am, but one of the horrific experiences of the Pan-African Society of Music Education, where I was, that a person who was teaching music education said, when people come to me, this is in Africa, the general area of Africa, they have had no music education. I even have to teach them how to draw a treble clef. And my heart sank. I thought, you know, where are we that any of these orate traditions that are around us all the time are not regarded as music? Yeah. And you know, and going back to what you said, Samantha, it was a lovely presentation. When I was teaching in the 1970s in London, two young girls who were 8, I think, they said they were learning music at the temple, and they were learning the harmonium, as is quite common in relation to the Sikh and Hindu temples. I said, I don't know anything about it. We'll teach you, they said. So every lunchtime I sat down with these two young people with their harmonium, and they taught me sa, pa, ba, ga, and so on. And somehow or other, the teacher is learner. We don't have to be authorities, but if we want to teach people to learn, then we must be learners. And it transformed, I mean, they could learn from me and I could learn from them. So those are two provocative statements about the orate and the literate in Africa, and also the practice of being a learner and being excited by what they bring.
Thank you, Jude.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Do you mind if I?
Kathleen's got a hand up. I'll come back to you, Dave. Kathleen,
Okay.
yeah. Go on, Kathleen. Yeah.
Thanks, Samantha. I wanted to ask you about structured responses, because the position that I'm in, I am a course director for a master's program, and we take a master's in community music, and we take applications from people who have undergraduate degrees but also recognized prior learning. So we look for musicians from all different kinds of musical traditions, oral and classical, you know, right across experiences. But one of the things that I'm finding is, in terms of the applications I get, even though I think I'm casting the net wide, I tend to still get applications from only particular demographics. And I suppose I'm trying to think about structural things I can actively do to change that, you know. And I know there must be things I'm not doing, but I'm just wondering what they can be. Like, for example, I'm thinking a lot about visibility. So I know what is possible for me as a young woman in academia, because I have lots of senior women ahead of me who've pushed me on, who've opened doors for me, who've welcomed me. And I really want to do that now. And I'm now at a point in my career when I have the capacity and the opportunity to do that. And I suppose I'm just wondering how to best do that really effectively, and to broaden it as much as possible, to be thinking about issues of race, and also issues of gender, and also issues of ability, disability. So just to be active. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, you know, you hit the nail on the head there, because when you pointed out that you have seen yourself represented, that is key. That is why workforce diversity is so important, because for people to see representation that looks like them, that is the I could be president after President Obama syndrome. That is the moment where it changes the lives of so many children. So you kind of want to do a top down. You want to start by looking at, hopefully within your organization, what's happening here. Okay, do we have representation right at the very top where we are? And if not, again, when you talk about broadening the net and getting more people involved, where there's underrepresentation, reach out to certain people in that community, say, look, this is what we're doing here. This is what we're looking for. These are the issues. Where is it? Where do people look? Where do people go? I mean, I took umbrage with my work always advertising in Rheingold and The Guardian, and very kind of middle class, high level music education, kind of literature and publications and so forth, which immediately excluded anybody whose background wasn't like that. Now, it doesn't sound like you're doing it in that respect, but again, it may be some very untraditional ways of getting people through the door, without not necessarily even saying, we've got a job, apply for a job, but maybe putting on certain training events, skills development events, something which encourages people. And at that moment, at that event, saying, this is actually things that we're looking at doing. We're trying to change here. We'd really appreciate you helping us. Invite people in, have a focus group, have an advisory board, and be very blunt about it. We want people of color. We want disabled people. Look at the groups that are missing. We want you to help us. I bet if you put an ad out and said, we'll pay you or an allowance or something to come and support us as an organization, just have some conversations, you'd get people coming through the door just to say, you know what, yeah, great, I want to be heard. Because this is the thing, people want their voices to be heard, and they don't want people to just say, thank you very much for that. You know, it's actually about saying, we want to talk to you because we want you to help us, and then taking on board that advice and making that real difference. So I think it's finding creative ways to get them to engage with you, not necessarily on a recruitment level, on another level, to have these conversations, to find out where and how and why. You know, they will tell you straight. I don't know, is it Ireland? Is it which part?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Limerick, yeah.
Okay, I mean, like in London, I mean, we're quite blessed. You know, there's lots of organisation and places to go to. I don't know the landscape so well in Ireland, but I'm sure there are people there who do. You know, as Pete said, you know, look through your book. Who have you got? Who are your friends of colour? Even if they're not in the field of music, and just say, listen, I really need help with this. I'm a bit stuck. But always keep one eye on that top level. Always keep one eye. If I came to work for you, when am I going to see someone that looks like me in that position? Yeah, and kind of keep your eye on a slightly larger prize. But that would be my advice.
Thank you, Sam. Dave, I'm going to Dave, and then who wants to speak after Dave? Then Lorinda.
Yeah, I'd like to ask.
Dave's been trying to speak for a long time.
No, it's fine. I'd like to ask Sam a question just about appropriation, and you know, I think one of the things that I've struggled with a bunch of like collaborators that I work with is, am I allowed to do like R&B soul music? And I think we had another presentation last seminar from Denise that kind of talked about this and had different perspectives on it. But that's one thing. Like right now, you know, we're all stuck in our homes, and so we're wondering like where are the lines in collaboration?
So I think with regard to Pete, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No, I know you do a bit. I'll do answer that as well a bit. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it has to be handled quite sensitively. But to be fair, some will, some won't. So what? You're not going to please everybody. That's the first thing. You will find, you could talk to me and I'll say, yeah, Dave, that's absolutely cool. You know, why not? I love the fact that you're embracing our music and our culture. And you'll find others who go, oh no, you shouldn't be doing that. So there's definitely, you're not going to please everybody. My understanding, my thinking behind it is, as long as it's done sensitively with acknowledgement. Obviously, after years of colonialism and slavery and, you know, taking of everything possible from Black cultures, the thing that people hate the most is when, you know, people who are not of that culture take what they want and then make it their own or claim it's their own, or don't give the homage or the respect that is due. So I think it's about doing the homework, getting the history behind it, giving credit where it's due, and making it very clear that this is your way of saying, I fully appreciate and respect and enjoy and love this type of music because of X, Y, and Z. And I understand that it comes from here, and I understand and relate to this. And that is one of the reasons why I am producing this type of music. And I don't think anybody could argue with that.
Great. Yeah, no, I can't add to that. That's lovely. Lorinda and then Joy. This is good. I'm very happy. Can I just check, is everybody happy in this room? Is this the room that you wanted to be in? Is this kind of moving? No, because I put myself on the line throughout all of these, just trying to keep this agenda at every assembly, and so I just want to make sure that this is okay, because it's so important to me. Lorinda, go.
Just regarding tertiary education, because the start of this conversation was kind of aimed at the education curriculum towards children at a school age, but I did my honors in choral conducting in Cape Town 2 years ago, and I requested to take ethnomusicology module as opposed to musicology. I just thought as a South African choral conductor it would have been more applicable. I'd learn more useful information, and I was turned down, and because it was just unheard of, and no, you can't do that, and you have to take musicology because it's not weighted the same or seen the same. And up until today, it's one of my biggest regrets. So I think my question is, can these things change on the smaller level if we don't address it on tertiary level? If these you know, weighing ethnomusicology versus why is it even two separate things? And
yeah.
yeah.
So a while back, Pete and I were also involved in a project called Inspire Music, which I'm sure, Pete, you will agree was just fantastic. I mean, and
that's where
we
we
had
met.
this very, yes, yeah, it was actually. We had this very discussion as part of the group, which was, you know, we can do loads at what we might call grassroots level. You know, you could do stuff with primary school kids, but as soon as you get to A levels and university, which is actually the key area, because you're right, you know, I could not be in the position I'm in if I didn't get a degree in music and possibly a master's, I don't know, but I'd like to think that wasn't a deal breaker. But, you know, it was like, that's where the drop off happens. You're absolutely right. And for government to change, for policies to change, for curriculum to change, oh, it's just a never-ending battle, you know. And it is, again, something, thankfully, which is being looked at. We've got two organizations here in the UK. We've got Arts Council England, who've recently brought in they have a return that organizations, NPOs, non-profit organizations have to give every year, and they've brought in diversity tables as part of that for the first time. I mean, this is in the last couple of years. They're actually saying to organizations, what's happening here? Why have you got people at this higher level? And also Music Mark and Ofsted and the organizations who basically are the governing bodies. And a lot more questions are being asked. But I'll be honest with you, there's a lot more people out there who want things to stay the same. And it's a perennial challenge. And you're absolutely right. There isn't much that can happen until at that higher level policy change takes place. And I think that's key. Pete, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, it's just interesting. The Arts Council scheme is called the Creative Case for Diversity, which so it's the creative case. It's kind of, it's very nice. It's not, it's quite, I mean, it took me a while to understand it, but the creative case for diversity, you know, make it a creative thing rather than kind of tick box, but make it clear that it's going to change your creativity and your whole connection with your audience, with your community, with the people that you work with. And it's really it's a powerful statement. Unfortunately, they haven't really got a whip hand on it. You know, they're not crossing. They are pushing people, but they're not pushing hard enough. I'm going to keep going. So I think it's Joy next from South Africa. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Samantha, for your introduction. It's always good to hear what your experiences are, and I always learn quite a lot by listening. So my first community music experience was teaching violin at two community music projects at two children's homes in a low income area in Pretoria. So I'm very passionate, especially about cultural responsive teaching and making formal music education pedagogies more accessible in informal settings. So your story, and especially your string background, resonated very strongly with me. And so I was in the UK for the first time in January, visiting the Royal Northern College of Music. And I think it was Emily that mentioned decolonization. And I remember going to see Kokoroko live, which was amazing. And their last song was called Colonial Mentality. And after my stay, I realized that, you know, the importance of having a song that kind of references the colonial past, especially England. And especially living in South Africa with such a deep historical past of not only decolonialism and colonialism and apartheid. I do really sometimes, especially as a white Afrikaans person, really think about my positionality, and especially when we are talking about, you know, orate and, you know, the orate and the literate music traditions. And that's why, you know, culturally responsive teaching really resonates strongly with me, even though I know I can't teach certain cultural music of South Africa. I do you know, see it as June mentioned, as an opportunity to learn, and I'm hoping to explore, you know, especially I'm writing an autoethnography about, you know, cultural dissensus in my community music practices and how we can really, I think it's a lifelong journey to engage through music authentically, and especially in a diverse context. So if you have any tips on how to go about, you know, cultural diversity in community, like in community music or music education, I will greatly appreciate that.
No problem. I mean, I don't profess to have all the answers, so but I have worked with quite a few organizations. The talk that I was part of with Pete, I remember quite distinctly, Pete, you might remember as well, that after we finished doing the session, I was sort of packing up my stuff and I turned around, there was like a queue of people standing around, and I remember thinking, oh, I wonder what they're all waiting for, and they're all waiting to talk to me. And I was kind of like, oh, and they kind of were like, oh, we're really interested in hearing. And I really wasn't expecting the response. And initially, I must admit, I was slightly overwhelmed by it. Like, oh no, you know, I'm not some guru. I just have these views and these ideas. And then, you know, over time, I started thinking, well, actually, that they are valid and they're useful, and maybe I can help people. So I started to have meetings with people one-to-one, and it's about the case-by-case basis, you know, getting to understand, like Kathleen was saying, you know, your organization, your environment, who you're working with, really understanding your own values and that of your organization, and then coming up with a plan of action. And most of the time people have the answers. You know, it's not really rocket science, it's just that we're not quite sure how to go about things, and does this make sense? So I'm kind of there just to be a bit of a critical but supporting friend, you know, like the motivator that makes you jog when you don't want to, because they know at the end of it you're going to feel really good. That's kind of what I do with these organizations. I steer them through the sea of uncomfortability till we come out the other side. So I'm really pleased to hear what you've been doing.
Make sure the waves are very strong when you steer them. So great, this is good. Irene, then Leo, and then Mary. Okay.
Thank you so much for your talk and for sharing this with us. I, aside from teaching at Concordia University in Montreal, I work with the Music for People organization, which is all about inclusivity in music improvisation. Of course, as all of this came about, we were very challenged. And yes, we looked at our board and, you know, we engaged in this conversation. And yes, it put us, the entire white board, into a place of discomfort. And we reached out. We reached out to members who had come to our workshops. And I engaged in conversations. One of them was with a wonderful improviser from Japan, and who is also very involved in a lot of anti-racist work. And we talked for about 2 hours. And I squirmed in my seat so many times because she was kind enough to point out so many things that I would say unconsciously. I don't know what I don't know. And, you know, and shared a lot of very generous resources too, which one of them, Decolonizing the Music Room, which is an excellent resource. You know, and one of the things that came up was improvisation, you know, which is what we do. And of course, improvisation, I think, is even more, well, she said to me, how are you going to teach so many other different cultures about improvisation when we've been doing it for longer than you have? Or I forget how she phrased it, but just really, how would you say an improvisation collective could reach out? Or is there a place where other improvisation or different improvisation collectives are? We really want to make an effort, because we just put our foot in our mouths time after time after time.
I'm not entirely sure. That's not an area that I have a lot of knowledge of. I might have to defer to Pete, who looks like he's about to go somewhere.
No, I'm just putting my phone on to charge, just a sec. All
right. I mean, all I know is that the nature of our organization is whenever there's a gap, whenever there's something that we don't know, we find someone who does. So it's about, you know, really just asking around, and someone will know someone. There's a whole load of networks. I mean, this in itself is a huge network right here, you know. So I would definitely say just to explore your networks, local groups, more regional, what further afield, worldwide even. Because like you said, yeah, they're out there, it's out there somehow, but it's just putting in that work. But once you make it a priority, and it sounds like you have done, and I love the fact that you said you looked at your board, your whiteboard, and said, okay. I've recently been appointed a board of trust, a member of the board of trustees for Music for Youth, an organization here, and they did exactly that. They said to themselves, you know what, we need to make a change here, and they were unapologetic about it. And I think that's the key thing, is not skirting around the bush, kind of saying, listen, this needs to change, this is what we need to do, but we want to find the right people who can help us and support us from specific groups of society, and you're in that group, and can you help? And if you can't, do you know anyone else that can? And just putting it out there.
Yeah, absolutely great. Yes.
Thank you.
Leo, where in Brazil are you, Leo?
Yeah, I am Brazil, in the south of Brazil, and it's very cold here.
Which city are you in?
I live in Cuiabá, that is in the middle of South America, really in the middle of South America, but I'm in Porto Alegre, where the ISME conference was held in 2014.
Lovely city. Oh, yes, we had a very nice time there. Okay, so what was your comment?
Yeah, my comment was about, we do have a network, a Latin American network of music teachers. It's called FLADEM. Actually, it was born within an ISME conference in 1994. But what I was going to comment is that if we see this chat room here, how many of us are English native speakers? How many?
How many? Put your hands up if you're an English native speaker.
Okay. Yeah, and how many of us are Black people? How many of us are indigenous people? Why aren't these people represented at in CMA as a whole? This is my third CMA conference, and it's always looked like this. It's always looked like white people, usually cisgender, usually straight people, usually. ISME represent and CMA represent the same status quo as in other places. We should try to think as an institution how to be more open to other people, starting with the language.
Starting with so we only ever speak in English. We never do bilingual working at all. It's very clear that's been, but it's precisely that, Leo, that has inspired these conversations and has pushed me to keep pushing it, and the other commissioners to keep pushing it, because we were looking, and I have to say that it's been, the fact that we've been digital has made it more inclusive, but it's but it hasn't taken us nearly far enough. But it's a starting point.
Even when CMA was held in Salvador, Brazil, that's one of the blackest cities from Brazil, we all just saw white-haired people.
I remember it was quite scary.
Can I just come in on that? Sorry, Patrick, Leo. Thank you for raising that. I'm sure Pete won't mind me saying that I challenged him on this very issue when he got in touch with me. And I understand, that obviously the cohort of people who signed up, it is what it is. But again, those questions should be asked. So as the first thing I did when I joined the Zoom call was to flick through the various different screens. And, and I have to do this. When I go to places, I do this. I literally go, right, let me see how many people. And then I'm always resigned to the fact, okay, so I'm one of two. There's 104, or I'm one of 4, or I'm one of 5. And unfortunately, it's just a reality for me. I'm just kind of used to it by now. But like you said, the organization should be looking at it and going, you know what? Something's not right here. There's an imbalance here. We're talking about music education, guys. We're not talking about fencing. We're not talking about a sport which is an area which is historically only for the white masses and upper classes. We're talking about music. Sometimes it surprises me that, and I know we've got music educators around the world who represent every single group you can think of, but you've got to ask the question, what is the barrier? Do they even know about this event? How did you all find out about it? If you've got people of color who did anybody ask them about it? It's like, there's all these things like, what's really happening underneath it all? So I definitely think, I know they've held conferences in African countries. Am I right, Pete? There has been.
The CMA hasn't been. I don't think ISME.
Oh, I
has
was thinking
been,
of ISME.
Yeah, no, ISME. I don't know whether maybe it was in South Africa. Was it at some point?
Yes,
Might
there
have
was a
been,
South
yeah.
African
Yes.
gathering.
Okay, but again,
Okay,
Leo's
so
point about English being the key language and so forth, and where they're situated. All of these are questions that should be asked, and the fact that we're having this conversation in this group means that Pete and other people in the organisation can go away and go, right, let's evaluate the conference. Oh, that was good. That worked really well. Okay, let's just talk about this, because next year we don't want it to look like this. So what are we going to do about that?
Can I just sorry, this just Kathleen or Gillian, could you, my WhatsApp's gone down, so I can't communicate with anybody, so do you want to just find out and tell them to chuck us out of here? Could you ask them for 5 more minutes if possible?
Yeah, I have to go in 5 minutes, so
yeah, okay. So if it's possible to ask them for 5 more minutes and then throw us out. Mary briefly and then Patrick, so keep them quite short.
Yep, I'll be very quick. I just want to thank you so much for this talk. Sam, thank you for everything you've shared. And some of you may know this. If you don't know yet, in the United States, Ed Sarath has begun, he's the author of a book called Black Music Matters, and he's created, I'm on a task force.
What was his name? Sorry?
Ed Sarath. I've got it in the chat a little higher.
Yeah,
he's a professor at University of Mr. Ed Sarath. His book is Black Music Matters. Just last fall, we had a think tank on the Alliance for the Transformation of the Musical Academy. And within that, now there's a task force on musical racism. Ed's a really prolific writer and I put the link up above on the chat for ATMA, the Alliance for the Transformation of the Musical Academy. So just for anybody this is a huge topic. And I just wanted to make sure people know, at least in the United States, there is efforts toward thinking in more critical ways, and I'll put in the chat all the names of the people that are on this task force collaborating. One of them, Ted McDaniels at Ohio State University, is also on the National Association for the Study of African American Music. So there's some collaborations going on in that way. But boy, I tell you, I'm in a school of music that really needs some help. But I'm also in a college of education that's aware, and we watched a really powerful video about the difference between being racist and being anti-racist. And there's a story, a little 9-minute segment on that. I highly recommend that I put up in the chat as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Mary, I really love the fact that, we're educating ourselves. I mean, myself also. Make no assumption because I'm a person of color that I know all about my history. Yes, of course I know some, but there's so much literature out there, there's so much documentation, and American history, I've probably only scratched the surface, but the information is out there, and realistically, there's nothing stopping us saying, I'd like to find out a bit more about Black composers. It's like if you ask all of your friends who are involved in music, how many Black composers can you name? And if the answer's like maybe 1 or 2, what can I do to change that? Find out, and then add that. Yeah. All I was going to say was, I think we lose the chat when we come out of the breakout room. So I don't know, Pete, if there's some way to kind of
I'll
3 dots on the right of the chat. You can click that and then
but when the breakout room, oh, you can save it. Oh,
right now you can.
Know that. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you very much for that,
Patrick.
And also,
Patrick.
Sorry.
Yeah. Did you have?
I don't know. Do we have time, Pete?
You have a couple of minutes. You have a couple of minutes, and then we're going to get thrown out. So,
yeah, I think that. Yeah, thanks, Sam, for leading the conversation. I think is really important. I think that what I wanted to, to articulate is that, the visible and the systemic are not always the same, right? And I think that one of the important things for us to consider in a lot of these conversations is where we started to a certain extent, which is access to credentials, access to institutions, access to organizational is it's fundamental to the fact that we might see in 10 years time a screenshot that looks differently than this, right? The organization and the willingness of individuals within the organization, or quite honestly, the contact book, it has obviously an impact, but has a limited impact, right? If we don't have a much more, structural set of changes that, quite honestly, and I'm at a university, depend on access to institutions. Right. Obviously, then ISME has a lot of work to do to providing and inviting and facilitating access to its own institutional structure. But in many ways, almost all of us are working in the field and are professionals, and they're only working in the field because they had access to either vocational or university or college. And those are significantly still the basis. And that goes then back to schooling. I mean, schooling in Canada and US, Ruben Gaston-Bide Fernandez, a colleague of mine here at U of T, just did a brilliant study on high schools in Toronto, which is one of the most multicultural cities in the world, and showed very clearly that that environment is an environment that is wildly racialized and really colonial. And so I think that we have to, at times it seems like, obviously I think it begins with us. My own trajectory, I was born and raised in Brazil. English is not my first language. From a racialized family background, and although passing white, we have to recognize, and I think it is important, the distinction between what is immediately visible and the tendency to go to what is immediately visible, and really thinking about the structural, right? And this is why I appreciate the way, Sam, you started, thinking about institutions and organizations and the work that we need to do within them, but also looking at how do we amplify that work into more and more institutions. It needs to go beyond having people on the board, as you articulated. So I just wanted to bring that back, because I think that is the structural change that is so significant. And that's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen.
No, it's not.
Generations time.
Yeah. It's going to, and I think that's the key thing as well, is not to be disheartened, by what appears to be very little gains, because, every day that somebody makes a decision that they're going to call something out, every day somebody goes, oh, actually, I've noticed every moment that everybody in this breakout room steps away from here, and suddenly something that I might have said or somebody said, it triggers them to make a difference, do something different, to think slightly differently, to challenge. Oh, that's interesting that I think that. All of those little moments, that's what I mean about this collective consciousness. I feel a shift. I sense it. I just hope it doesn't lose momentum, and I think that's why I said at the beginning, people, you have to speak up. You can't stay quiet. And this is about everything. This is not just about Black Lives Matter. This is about any form of injustice, any form of, situation where you feel like, okay, there's a lack of representation. Even if people want to stop you from talking, oh, just stay quiet, sit down. No, you have to keep saying, no, this is something that's important. And I don't know, one day, like you said, maybe we will look at these screens and see a completely different view. So I'm going to be optimistic. It doesn't hurt.
We have to be optimistic. Nate, in that first week, so Nate, he said it's a necessity. It's just a necessity. It's not a question. So we're going to get booted out and go back. So thank you very much, Sam. Can I just so it's really fantastic. I tried to get Sam in the first week, and it was just too many things happening. So I'm so
thank you,
so very
happy.
Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you. I need to admit something before we get kicked out. I was very concerned and nervous about doing this, and I kept saying to Pete, "But I don't know anything about community music. I don't know